Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the Getting Started with Freshbooks webinar. There's probably a good reason you showed up today. Maybe you're ready to take the next step towards more organized finances, or it could be that you're frustrated with that was not designed for invoicing. Or perhaps you're curious as to see what the Freshbooks Buzz is all about. Either way, if you're joining us today, it shows you're interested in keeping your books organized, being paid faster, so you can focus on doing what you love. Years ago, when our CEO Mike saved over an invoice he'd been working on for hours, he decided there had to be an easier, less frustrating way for small business owners to invoice clients and get paid. And so, with that slip of the mouse, FreshBooks was born and easy invoicing became a reality. So let me show you how FreshBooks works. Let's log into our FreshBooks account. The first step in doing so is typing in our URL in the browser. Awesome. When I'm here, I'm going to enter in my username and my password, and I'll log in here. When I'm in the account, I want to personalize things. So let's click on the Settings tab and the Company sub-tab. Here I want to go ahead and put in my address, which it will appear on the invoice for my clients. I can even change my account URL here. When you're done, hit Save. Next up is the Accept Credit Cards tab. FreshBooks conducted some research and that indicated that clients that used a payment gateway got paid 11 days faster. So it may be worth checking out to see if we have any of the gateways that you currently work with. This way, when your client receives the invoice, all they have to do is enter in the card information and the invoice will be marked as paid. And I'll demonstrate this a little later on in the webinar. Next up is the Taxes tab. Here you'll want to enter in the taxes specific to your region. Here in Ontario, we have HST, and it's 13%. If I had any other taxes I wanted to add, feel free to add them here. And when you're done, hit Save. Next up is the Colors and Logos tab. Here we're able to upload our company logo. Let's do so, browse the file, and hit Save. Now, I can change the menu color as well if I'd like. I think it looks good that way. And I'll hit Save. Next up is the Template tab. You can toggle on or off different templates. So you have a classic template and a clean template. So you can choose which one would work best for you. And then we have the Permissions tab. Here you're able to toggle on or off different permissions and set limits to what your staff members and what your clients can see. So say you had staff members that worked in the system for you, but you didn't want them to see the expenses, estimates, or invoices. Simply unselect them and hit Save at the bottom of the page. You do want to keep in mind that if you are turning off permissions, your staff or clients may not be able to view them. For example, if you turned off the Invoices tab here and hit Save, when you send an invoice to the client, they will receive the email, but they won't actually be able to view it. So when they click on the link to view their invoice, it will say that they need to contact the administrator. So if you are sending out invoices, make sure you have that enabled. And when you're done, hit Save. Let's pop over to the Emails tab. We have different email templates that go out from FreshBooks on your behalf. For example, when you send out a new invoice to your client will receive an email first, and it will say something like this. Let's hit Edit. Hey, first name, last name, except these variables will replace the client's with the client's first name and last name. To view an invoice from company name, which would be ShutterSnap, for whatever payment amount or to download a PDF copy for your records, click the link below. And the client simply has to click that link and they're taken directly to their invoice. So you can customize this and make it more personalized. When you're done, hit Save. You can do these for any of these emails here, but there is one that I want to go through with you. It's called the Late Payment Reminders. Now, late payment reminders are automatically emailed to your client after a specific amount of days that they have not paid their invoice. For example, I have Reminder 1 set up to go out 20 days after the invoice date for unpaid invoices. And right now it will say first name, last name. So Stephanie Stevens, your invoice is past due. Please pay your invoice. And then the client can simply click on the invoice link and is taken to their invoice. It's just a nice way to have your client reminded that they have something outstanding. Go ahead and press save after each email that you make. Now feel free to go ahead and customize these. Maybe you want Reminder 1 to say, hey, your invoice is almost due, and Reminder 2 to say, hey, your invoice is now due. You can make that as personal as you'd like. Let's close this window. Perfect. And then we have the miscellaneous tab, which are just some random tweak styles and knobs. Okay, now that we've personalized our FreshBooks account, I think it's time for us to create a client and then some invoicing. Let's click on the People tab here and go ahead and click on New Client. Now, you'll see right away that the email is a mandatory field. If your client does not have an email address, feel free to put in your own email address or, for example, no email at your company name. So I'm going to go ahead and put in her email address here. And then I'm going to go back to the top here. Now, an organization name is not mandatory, but if you did work on a business-to-business basis and you wanted to put in your client's business name, you can put it in here. If you leave it blank, then it will default to the client's first and last name. And then you have the different currencies. So let's click here, and this is the default currency for my client. I can change it to any of these currencies on this list. And we have quite a few. When you're done, hit update. The same applies for the language of the client. Now, by changing the language here, it doesn't actually change the language for the entire app. It simply changes the language of the invoice for your client. So the emails will still be in English, but the invoice will appear in that alternate language for you. And then you have reminders, which is what we just set up a few minutes ago in the Settings and Emails tab. And you can turn these on or off for specific clients. And then you have the late fees. You can do the same. And when we create an invoice, we'll go through late fees in a little more detail. Okay, and then you can go ahead and put in your client's address. Now, if you had any internal notes for your client, feel free to add them here. Perfect. And when you're done, hit save. Now that we've created our first client, let's check this client out. Let's click on the Clients tab and click on the organization name. It gives me like a little mini CRM for my client, which is nice. So if I ever need to check out their email address or their address, or if I had put their phone number in here, I could go ahead and just quickly find out that information. Then we have the Staff and Contractors tab, where you're able to add staff members or contractors to your FreshBooks account. Here we have a brand new feature. It's the Accountant tab, so you can actually invite your accountant to view your financials within FreshBooks. And then we have Assign Clients, which is if you had staff members, you could assign specific clients to specific staff. And then you have the Sent Emails tab, which is a list of all of the emails that went out from your FreshBooks account. All right, so let's click on the Invoices tab here, and let's create our first invoice. All we need to do is, that's right, every invoice needs a client, is select a client. Here are those same four options. the currency, the language. If you wanted to turn on or off reminders or late fees for your client, you can do it on the invoice as well. Here we have the invoice number. So let's just say I didn't want my client to know this was my very first invoice sent using Freshbooks, or hey, ever. I can change it here. I can simply change the number, and the next invoice I create will be in ascending order. Then I have the date of issue. Now, by changing the date of issue, it doesn't actually change the invoice to be sent that date. It simply changes the date of issue of that invoice. Then we have a PO number. Now, FreshBooks doesn't actually handle purchase orders in the system, but if you did do purchase orders in another system and you wanted to reference it in this invoice, feel free to put it here. Now, let's talk a little bit about invoicing. If you apply a discount here, or let's talk a little bit about discounting. If you apply a discount here, it will be applied against the entire invoice. And here's the online payment function that we set up in the account earlier on in the Settings and Accept Credit Card subtab. I choose for my client to accept for them to be able to make an online payment to me. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and look at the tasks and the items. Now in FreshBooks, tasks are used for time and items are used for flat fee amounts. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new task. Let's go ahead and click New Task. Okay, and I'll make my rate here $110. I'll choose 1 hour, and I can select my tax. That's how easy it was. We go ahead and create an item. And I'll select my tax. Now, the really nice thing about FreshBooks is once you create a task or an item, these are reusable. So on another invoice, you can simply just click on the drop-down menu and select that new tax or item. Perfect. You'll see the math is all done for me. The subtotal was $1,310 and the discount was $131 and the tax was $153 with a balance of $1,332.27. It's very clear for your client to read and it looks really organized. And then here you have set your default terms. So you can spell out your terms for your client. Let's click on Set Default Terms. Here you're able to put in your terms, and if you choose, you can add late fees to your clients. You can apply these fees automatically to invoices after the number of days that you specify here. So you can enable late fees here, and you can choose to charge either a late fee or a percentage of that invoice. You can choose the deadline, the fee amount, and if you wanted to apply taxes as well. Perfect. And then you have any notes that are visible to your client here. So you can choose to put notes to your client, maybe a smiley face, or a personalized message. Then you have 3 options at the bottom of the invoice. You have Save as Draft, which means you're still working on it. And you'll go ahead and you'll take your time, but it doesn't count as part of your reports. So if you save something as a draft, it won't be included in any of your outstanding reports. It either has to be marked as sent, paid, to include as outstanding. Then you have Send by Email, which is just sending your invoice by email, and then Send by Snail Mail. Now that's a postal service that FreshBooks provides. You can send your invoice by postal service. Your client also will receive a return envelope so they can just put a stamp on it and send it back to you. Now every account will start off with 2 stamps. If you need more, you can definitely purchase more in the Home tab and then buy stamps. Let's go ahead and click Send by Email here. This is the email that I had set up earlier in the Settings and Emails tab. I'm going to go ahead and hit Send. Perfect. Now again, this is another feature that FreshBooks recently released. And this is where you're able to request a review from your client. So after your client pays online, they could be prompted to leave a review about your service. If you wanted to turn this feature off, simply go to the Settings and the Miscellaneous subtab. I'm going to hit Not Now for now. And then you have the Recurring tab. Now, this is just the same as an invoice. It's just you're setting up the invoice to go out on a schedule. So you can choose to start the invoice to go out, say, today. You can choose to how often, how many, maybe 2, which client. And this is how quick and easy it is to actually set up an invoice, by the way. I think that was about 10 seconds, maybe. And now that recurring profile was saved. So if I click on the recurring tab, it lets me know I have a recurring profile set up for Stephanie. If I click on the profile ID, it pulls up all the subsequent invoices for that client. All right, then I have received, and the received is any invoices that I've received in my Freshbooks account. So maybe I upgraded my Freshbooks subscription and my receipts I'm looking for. I can click on an invoice that I receive and choose to receive it in my Freshbooks account. It will then be in my received folder. And then I have the Payments tab. So let's just say that my client sent me a check. I simply need to click on New Payment, select the invoice, enter the payment here, say it was check, then you can go ahead and put your check number here. You can send them a payment notification if you like, or you can hit save. Awesome. And then I have the Credits tab. So this is any credits that I have given to my client. And then I have the Items tab as well. So any new items I wanted to create in the system. Even if I wanted to edit an item, an existing one, I could do so by clicking Edit. Awesome. So now that we went through invoices, let's take a quick peek at estimates. We'll create one and I'll show you what your client will see. So let's click on New Estimate, select our client. We can select what we're sending the estimate for. Okay, and I'll send it by email. Now for estimates, we can't actually send an estimate via snail mail, so that's why you didn't see that feature available. But if you'd like, you can always save the estimate, print it, and then send it via postmail. That's definitely possible. All right, so now that we've set this up, let's take a look at what our client sees. So my client gave me her username and password, and I'll log into her account here. Perfect. So it lets me know here, hey Stephanie Stevens, to view your invoice from ShutterSnap for this amount. Oh, perfect. Let me click directly on this link, and it logs me in as a client. You'll notice that because on the right-hand side it says Profile and Log Out. When I'm logged in as the administrator, it gives me many more options. However, due to the technology of FreshBooks, if I were to go ahead and click on Home, it logs me out as the client again. So the system knows. All right. This is what my client will see. And if they wanted to make a payment, all they need to do is click on Pay Now. And if they didn't want to pay online, simply enter in the payment under the Payments tab. And if they wanted to view any other work that you've done for them, like say estimates, they could simply click on Estimate and view it here as well. All right, so let's log out of our client view of the account and then log back in under the admin. Now that we've created invoices, created clients, and did an estimate, let's take a look at the Expenses tab. So within North America, we have the option to connect our bank account into the system. We can choose on Expenses, Bank Account, and then Add our account. We can look for our account and enter in our credentials. The system will then import all of the expenses from that account. Let's enter in a couple manual expenses here. The first type of expense that I'm going to enter in is a recurring expense. This is for my rent. Because I wanted to make the entry in my system each and every month, I'm simply going to click on recurring, select the frequency, and select forever. If I knew I was going to stop it on a certain day, I'll choose an end date. But if I didn't know the end date, I'll simply just leave it for forever, and I can always stop it in the future. I'm going to go ahead and add an expense, and you'll be able to tell it's a recurring expense because of this symbol there. Next up is an expense that I made on behalf of a client that I expect to recover from them. So I'll go ahead and put in an amount, $50. I'll put that under supplies. I'm going to go ahead and assign that to a client and hit add expense. And you'll know it's assigned to a client when you see unbilled there. So we have a couple statuses and we'll go through that. So you have unbilled, which means the expense was assigned to your client. Then you have invoice, which means that expense was now put onto an invoice. And you have recouped, which means the expense that was billed to your client was put on an invoice that was then paid from your client. So you've recouped the cost. Finally, you have a simple business expense. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my expense. I'll go ahead and put that under supplies again. Now I'll select my taxes and then select my tax. Now, what the system does is it back calculates the tax. So from $113, $13 was tax. This is not a recurring expense. It's not assigned to the client, but I do want to attach an image of the receipt. So I'll choose the file and I'll attach the receipt. And there you have it, the 3 types of expenses in Freshbooks. All right, so let's take a look at our time tracking tab here. Now within Freshbooks, you have the option to start projects in the system. So you can start tracking time against those projects. So let's create our very first project here. Let's click on the time tracking tab, and then the project sub-tab, and click on new project. Okay, I'm going to make my project name my client name, but you can make it anything you like. I can assign it to my client here. I can also create a new client as well. Okay, I can assign the client here. Perfect. And then we have the billing methods. So we have 4 different billing methods. An hourly staff rate is for any staff members working on your account. Maybe they all work at different rates. Well, you can go ahead and select an hourly staff rate. And then you have an hourly task rate, which means these are the things that you're doing on your project. So, for example, photo editing could be a task. Then you have an hourly project rate. So regardless of the complexity of the task or the seniority of the staff, doing the work, the project rate will always be the project rate. And then you have the flat project amount. That's self-explanatory, so no matter how long, how little you work for that project, it will be no higher than the negotiated project amount. I'm going to go ahead and select task rate. And a time estimate here is simply to keep you on track. It doesn't alert you and say, hey, you're almost at your estimated time. It simply keeps you on track as a visual. I'll just put 10 to show you how that works. And then we can add tasks. So let's go ahead and add a task. And we'll make that billable at $110. I'm going to go ahead and add a new task as well. So this is a stop motion video I'm doing. And I charge $2.80 an hour to work on this. Perfect. And if I had any team members that I wanted working on this project, I could add them here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Perfect. Now that my project's been created, I want to start logging hours. So let me click on the timesheet. I want to get our timer started in the background. So I've already tracked some time, or I've already logged some hours in October. So let me add them into Freshbooks. Simply want to click on the date and select the project, select the task, and then the hours. You can also put in any notes if you like. Perfect. Let's take a look at how our timer is doing here in the background. I'm going to press stop or pause, select what task I'm working on, and hit log hours. And the system has just made that entry for me. Now, let's just say I made a mistake on one of the hours. All I have to do is go ahead and click on the date and press edit. You can make the changes here and save the changes. Awesome. If we click on the Projects tab, it lets me know that I am 90% of my estimated hours. Now I'm good with this. I'm completely done, and I'm ready to generate an invoice for my client. All I'm going to do is click on the Time Tracking tab and Generate Invoice. I'm simply going to select my client, which project I want to include, and I'll format the time entries. So you can choose to have them all condensed under one single line. You can have them grouped or in detail. You can also choose to add expenses in the system for this project. So let's just say I wanted to add all unbilled expenses for my client. I can do so if I click Add All Unbilled Expenses and click on Create Invoice. And the system will do the work for me and bring in the time entries. Now, because I didn't save this invoice, I could change the way this appears. So I'm not really happy with nothing showing up individually. I kind of just want to see the way that it would look if I had all my tasks shown up individually. So I'm going to just leave this page without saving. Click on Generate Invoice. I'm going to change the time entries to Detailed. Select All Projects. Add All Unbilled Expenses. And then I'm going to create the invoice. And here we go. This is what my client likes to see. She likes to see everything laid out and organized. Perfect. Okay, now you'll see the expense. So we assigned the expense to our client earlier on in this webinar. But let's just say that I wanted to make a little bit of a profit off of this expense. All I have to do is just change the unit cost here. And the system will be able to track my cost of goods sold for me. Okay, and when I'm done, I'll hit Send by Email. Perfect. Okay, if I go back to the Time Tracking tab and the Project sub-tab, it lets me know that my hours are not unbilled anymore and they've been invoiced. All right, to wrap up this webinar, I just want to take you over to the Reports tab. I'm going to pull up a couple reports that are really important in Freshbooks. Well, they're all really important, but these are some key reports. Perfect. First up is our profit and loss report. This is our money in, our money out report. This lets me know what my cost of goods sold were, what the sales were, and what my profit is. It also lets me know, right now, I haven't made much of a profit. But it was only one day of work, so I'm being optimistic here. Okay, you can change this for the quarter. You can also change it for the year. Any report can be exported to a CSV or an Excel file, and it can also be printed. Then we have our balance sheet. Now, our balance sheet is completely empty, and you can learn more about balance sheets here. You can put in your assets, your liabilities, and your owner's equity. Now, by putting in any information here, it won't actually change it alongside the app. It simply will give you the option to put in this data here. Then you have the expense report, which lets you know in detail which expenses you've incurred in the system, or that you've at least inputted in the system. Then you have the payments collected report, which will show you all of the payments that you've received into Freshbooks. And then your timesheet details report, if you are interested in taking a look at the time that you've logged in the system. And you can filter that by specific projects, by certain team members, etc. And again, it can be exported and printed. Awesome. The last thing I want to show you is the home page. If we click on the Home tab, this is a snapshot of your account. So you're able to take a look at the invoices that are outstanding, the active projects with your unbilled hours, and all of your recent activity here. And that is everything. So I want to thank you again for joining our Getting Started with FreshBooks webinar. If you ever need a hand, please feel free to reach us at support@freshbooks.com or call us at 1-866-303-6061. Thanks again for joining in, and stay fresh.